Hey, everybody. Welcome to the morning market briefing 420, April 20th, 2026. 420 is known as Narwhal Day because our original office is Suite 420, and that's what most people celebrate. So, hope you guys are ready. Ben, Tom, how was the weekend?
It was good.
It's big.
All right.
It's,
Resounding reviews.
Two 2-year-old birthdays. One for Tom.
Shout out young Evie, my niece, turning 2. It's a big one.
Yeah. Two's a
Doubling up.
Anytime you can line them up, that's good.
Yeah, start stacking those years. What was the other one?
My niece.
Oh, man. The nieces. Crazy. They should combine forces next year, do a joint 3-year-old party. Probably won't have in different states, but nonetheless. Lots to talk about today. We're going to get into all kinds of topics, but if I were to update everyone on the war, I would say that I don't really know what's going on. We got the Strait open shortly after the call on Friday. Then we got it closed. The IRGC firing at a French ship. As of right now, I think we're still closed, but it seems to be kind of hour by hour.
Schrodinger's Strait.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel like the narrative on the blockade has shifted quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 days. Now people thinking, oh, maybe this is a good idea, maybe even a genius idea. The Iranians really don't like it. It's very difficult for me to discern how effective it is. Pakistan is saying the blockade of the ports is a real hurdle to the talks. I think that's by design. I think when you put pressure on someone, it's supposed to hurt. But curious, Ben, as we come out of the weekend, what's kind of your assessment of where this thing is going?
I think it's kind of the same thing that we've been talking about. I mean, if I really step out and try to get 50,000 feet view, any of the minutia that we say on this call will probably be either in real time or in an hour or two completely put to bed. But I think the big idea here is that Trump wants out, and he's going to continue to try to get out however he can, and that includes opening the Strait, and he needs something on the nuclear. And I think that still remains in place, and I think they're going to continue to talk. There's some interesting Wall Street Journal articles that have come out. One in particular talked about, quote, Trump's public bravado, but also his own fears, and he ruminated on Jimmy Carter and didn't want to be in the same boat, so to speak, as him. And he talks about kind of failed Democrat ventures into the Middle East, whether it's Biden's pullout of Afghanistan or Jimmy Carter in Iran. And previously in his first term, he called the Middle East just a bunch of blood and sand. And so this was a little bit of a departure for him. But even now, I think he's taking a pacifist approach where appropriate or where he can. He was actually told by his advisors that they could take Kharg Island, and they were going to succeed if they wanted to. But Trump said, look, they'd be sitting ducks, and he does not want American casualties. And so I think that's something that's pretty big for him. And they also actually talked about the genesis of that Easter tweet, and he said he was basically just trying to say anything. He wanted to sound as crazy as possible because that's the language that the Iranians would understand.
It's crazy like a fox.
I mean, and I think that, I don't know if that message was taken, but they did get to talks.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I mean, thematically, I think you're spot on, Ben, that whatever we talk about, the news is so evolving in real time, and it's interesting that we're seeing that even in a period of negotiation and ceasefire. The deep-seated mistrust by both parties to each other, not only is it understandable, but it also, it just plays out in real time. You feel like it felt like Friday, certainly the market response was that we were inching towards a deal, and then Saturday, totally different tone. So it's really hard to discern or predict or expect what's next time. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the war front. I mean, we're seeing futures down now.
But not all that much.
Not much. Tom commented just a moment ago, surprisingly not down all that much.
Yeah, I was expecting to be down more. But I think that people are seeing this resolution is on the horizon. What that is, nobody knows yet. I mean, the Kalshi odds, I think, have it roughly 80% that there'll be a nuclear deal with Iran this year, but that's still pretty high. And I think that there's some, for as much flack as Trump gets, the willingness for past presidents going back all the way through history to just send people out to get killed for one cause or another has maybe been a little too fast and loose. I mean, he's been pretty directionally consistent on the idea that he does not like dead bodies in fields. He talks about it all the time with the war in Ukraine. Obviously, it's something that he finds like personally abhorrent. And I think that credit to him in a certain way where he doesn't want to send a bunch of guys out to die to take Kharg Island, because ultimately he's like, it's not worth it to me to do that. We can just continue to put pressure on them and we'll cause some market volatility, and he might take some flack and he might lose the midterm elections, but those people will still be living. And I think that that's for someone who's constantly accused of being a Hitler and causing holocausts and genocide of illegal immigrants or whatever you want to say, he actually is pretty against violence and has been consistently about that. I mean, he doesn't drink, he doesn't, he's very against drugs and drinking and smoking. He doesn't like the idea of eating food that isn't processed because he's worried about getting food poisoning. I mean, these are all things he's pretty consistent on all the time. Like he doesn't, I mean, it seems to me like he probably doesn't like boogers, like he seems like kind of who's a little bit grossed out by stuff, which is an interesting sort of mindset. Like he's a germaphobe. I mean, these are funny things that like you see all the time, but like if that ultimately leads to us not just sending a bunch of people to get stuck in a Middle Eastern quagmire for the third time in the last 20 years, like that's probably a good thing, even though it's like a weird personality quirk. I do like the line that was in there. It says, "Why would he use the F word? ? Trump swears profusely in private, but usually calibrates it in public and on social media." Same.
He did post yesterday morning, notably in all caps, within a lot of commentary, "No more Mr. Nice Guy," saying once again that he'll take down every power plant, every bridge, and that it'll be his honor to do so if they can't get a deal done. So staying on that tone, we'll just have to keep seeing what happens. In market news, Ben, got a couple deals getting made.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the drumbeat that continues. I mean, I think to Tom's point, the market's really not reacting all that much. I mean, equities, yes, but bond market, I think the 10-year's up a whopping 1 basis point this morning.
Yeah, we're back to 426.
So really nothing. But on the deal side, we're continuing to see deals get done. QXO, which was the spinoff of XPO Logistics, which Brad Jacobs in the logistics world is something of a king, I guess. People really like the guy.
No kings.
But he first orchestrated the roll up of what became XPO, and then they spun off QXO, and now he's really trying to build the building distribution business, because he thinks that the process of getting building materials to site is cumbersome, and there's a lot of money that can be made in rolling those up. So he's looking to build that into a $50 billion revenue business, and they're acquiring Top Build for $17 billion, about half in stock and half in cash. This comes on the heels of their acquisition of Beacon Roofing Supply last year and Kodiak earlier this year. They were trying to buy GMS, which is the drywall distribution company, but Home Depot outbid them. I do wonder if this is QXO is going to be more dynamic and more aggressive and has a better person managing their acquisitions than Home Depot. And I do wonder if the move back into HD Supply and the acquisition of GMS by Home Depot is, yes, they have the assets, but do they have the talent? And I do wonder about that. But QXO trying to build that out. And then Eli Lilly is buying a cancer drug, essentially, for about $2 billion. A company by the name of Colonia Therapeutics has a CAR T kind of genetic immunotherapy that really helps to patient's own immune system fight cancer, and this one would be for blood cancer, multiple myeloma. So that's still in phase 1 trial, still very early on. But I do think we're going to continue to see M&A. There's a company called Revolution Therapeutics that was out talking a lot about its pancreatic cancer therapy, which has Ben Sass, who we've talked about on the show too, has credited that with extending his life. My granddad died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 50. So, it's always been kind of a
that's a tough one. Patrick Swayze, R.I.P. as well. I think he was also in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see some of these things that are, I feel like there was an era in which cancer specifically was so top of mind in terms of treatments, and there's obviously been massive improvements made in so many of these therapeutics. But in some ways, it just feels like there's so much going on that some of these things that might have been major headlines 10 years ago just kind of get lost. I mean, to think about something in the pancreatic cancer space that can double life expectancy after diagnosis, that's pretty insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going from 6.5 months to over 13 months with one small pill.
Yeah,
I think that's remarkable. But I guess the big takeaway of all of this is that deals continue to get done and business continues to move forward. This is something that didn't really happen during COVID, and I think that we're really seeing this continue. And then Goldman was talking about that. Look, you have the three-headed monster. You have AI that is really enabling companies to take more to allow them to more aggressively make acquisitions, because the onboarding is going to be a lot easier. You have economic improvement, and then you have deregulation at the federal level. And so you put all those three in, and Goldman CEO David Solomon said, look, that outweighs the geopolitics right now for a lot of businesses.
Yeah. We've got an interesting chart here. I don't know if we can pull this up on the Mamdani market, Hicks. But some analysis coming out. He gave his 100-day address. And, we heard a lot about Mamdani's market during the campaign. But we're going to get a 9,000 square foot mart that, for context, I was just looking this up because I was thinking, what is 9,000 square feet? What is this comparable to? The newer racetrack gas stations are 8,000 square feet. So the store's there. So 9,000 for a low price tag of just $3,333 per square foot.
Yeah, you're noticing this fine print there too. It does include that this is construction costs only and is on city-owned land and will not involve rent. So for context, a Kroger costs between 250 and 333 square feet. So roughly, 10% or less than 10% of the cost. And that's on a 120,000 square foot, your typical Kroger.
I would love, maybe we can have someone put this together. If any viewers want to put this together and send it over to us, I'd be very interested. What is the cost per square foot of the renovation of the new Federal Reserve building?
Oh, man.
What is versus the cost per square foot of a hotel close to the Federal Reserve building? Look at the
five-star hotel.
Look at the Conrad.
Yeah.
The Conrad, where my most recent Conrad, very nice hotel.
What's the one with the Dubliner in the bottom? That's a nice hotel.
Yeah.
And a great Irish pub. Shout out the Dubliner.
And then and then also compare that to the Mamdani market versus like something like Zabar's.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see what the difference is.
I mean, people complain about like, a toilet in the FBI building costs $400. This is why. There's literally no cost controls whatsoever.
This is another comparison, unrelated, but many people have talked about how hot the data center space has become. The construction of a data center, the price, this is not necessarily including the actual compute, but the construction, including things like HVAC, which is incredibly expensive as you have to cool these hot machines, including electrical infrastructure, things like that. The price has doubled over the last 2 years, but it's now $1,033 per square foot. So essentially, instead of a 9,000 square foot grocery store, you could have a 27,000 square foot data center, which would be a small data center, but you could do that for the same price.
And you have a lot more room. You have literally 3 times as much room for activities.
Yeah. So pretty impressive government efficiency there. We've got a big week earnings-wise. Ben, what's standing out, and what do you view as the companies that really are going to kind of drive the narrative for the market as we move forward?
Yeah, I think tomorrow morning we've got a lot of aerospace. I do think that we have a bottleneck in terms of airplanes and aircraft, given the travel demand. And so RTX and GE both report. We have DR Horton and Pulte Homes both reporting earnings this week. I don't expect the market to be fast, especially with interest rates where they are. But at the same time, I think that it's surprisingly resilient here. So I'm curious to see what happens with that. Obviously, Halliburton and Schlumberger report, I'm curious to hear what their thoughts are on increased drilling activity here domestically and also in Mexico, not to mention Venezuela. And then you've got some big guys, ServiceNow on the AI space. Are they going to be resilient? It's a software company. Graco and United Rentals on the industrial space. And then Blackstone with private credit and American Express also talking a little bit about how the consumer's doing. Obviously, Tesla as well on Wednesday night is going to be moving markets potentially.
Tom, what are you keeping an eye on?
I mean, I'm just going to see how these oil prices hang out. I mean, I was expecting much more volatility there. Oil's up about 5%. The WTI is like 88-ish, 96 on Brent. And I don't think that people are thinking this inflation is running out of control anymore. And I think that that's a good positive narrative for the economy at large heading into the summer. I think that if we can get some stability on rates, we might see spreads tighten a little bit on mortgages and maybe see some real activity towards the second half. But I mean, I'm very surprised by how muted this is. I think we're reaching the point where people are like, it is what it is. We've been in wars with Middle Eastern countries that lasted 20 years, and things were volatile on the front end, but eventually we realized that most of what goes on over there doesn't affect us on a daily basis. So,
thoughts on Kevin Warsh? If he gets confirmed?
We did get a little bit of feedback about the podcast this morning that we were too positive on Warsh perhaps, and that not so positive on Jay Powell. But I think that, you know, here, unlike the Wall Street Journal, we have an objective mandate. We have to look at the data. We have to suss it out, and we need to report the news objectively. And I think that objectively, Jay Powell has done a terrible job. You know, we forget that when inflation was 7.9%, he thought the best thing they could do is raise interest rates by a quarter percentage point, and that was going to really get us to 2% by the end of 2022. And that turned out not to be effective at all. In fact,
not at all.
It was probably the dumbest thing you could have done. Just raise the interest rates when you got to do it, and cut them when you got to do it. This whole wait and see business.
Do it or don't.
Yeah. So
there we go.
I will never be assailed by my objective coverage of Jay Powell.
And for what it's worth, in real time, you can go back and check the tapes, as they say. In real time, we weren't like, oh, this is the move that'll fix it.
Yeah. Also, still waiting on Nick Timrose to mention that PPI came out last week, and that it was much lower than expected, and then that could be pushing us towards cuts, which we're now getting close to pricing a cut back in. So
let's cut them. Hot boy summer.
What are you going to do?
We'll wrap it up there. You guys have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.